The old Victorian house on Cypress Lane held a secret as lush and untamed as its garden, a sanctuary for 4 women, a mother, her daughter, and the 2 neighbors they loved. Bound by disaster and a profound, unexpected connection, they found solace and passion in each other's arms, challenging every convention to build a family rooted not in blood, but in a radical, unbreakable love. But when the daughter returns home, heartbroken and adrift, she discovers that the deepest love often grows in the most unexpected ways, and that the greatest risk is not in embracing a complicated truth, but in being left outside of it forever. I'd appreciate if you like and subscribe to my channel for more lesbian stories. The Garden of Second Chances. The old Victorian house on Cypress Lane was a secret tucked behind a veil of weeping willows and untamed hydrangeas. To the outside world, it was a relic, a slightly shabby monument to a bygone era. But to the 4 women who lived within its warm, slightly crooked embrace, it was a sanctuary. It was the place where they had learned to mend their broken pieces with gold, in the ancient art of kintsugi, and in doing so, had created something more beautiful and resilient than what was originally there. The house belonged to Eleanor, though she would never use such a possessive term. "The house tolerates me," she would say with a soft, knowing smile. "It allows me to pay the bills and pull the weeds. It's a far more generous landlord than I deserve." At 68, Eleanor carried her age like a well-loved book, spine slightly cracked, pages softened with use, but the story within rich, profound, and captivating. Her hair was a magnificent sweep of silver, often held back by a stray pencil or a pair of reading glasses. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a lifetime of quiet observation and hard-won peace. She was the mother, not just in the biological sense, but in the way she anchored the entire household. Her love was the deep, steady root system from which the others could grow wild and tall. The daughter was Maya. At 28, she was a burst of vibrant color against Eleanor's gentle monochrome. She was a sculptor, her hands always faintly smudged with clay or charcoal. Her art was messy, emotional, and powerful, much like she had been for most of her life. Her relationship with Eleanor was a tapestry woven with threads of deep love, teenage rebellion, painful separation, and a recent, miraculous reconnect. They had found their way back to each other not just as mother and daughter, but as 2 women who had survived their own storms. And then there were the neighbors. The 2 women who had lived next door for years, whom Eleanor had watched from her kitchen window, their lives running on a parallel but separate track until fate, or perhaps the house itself, had drawn them all together. Clara was 55, a landscape architect whose own garden was a masterpiece of controlled chaos and breathtaking beauty. She was all earth tones and sturdy boots, her hands capable of coaxing life from the most stubborn soil. Her smile was slow to arrive but glorious when it did, transforming her thoughtful, often serious face into a map of warmth. She had been Eleanor's neighbor for 15 years, their friendship a slow, steady growth of borrowed tools, shared pots of tea over the fence, and silent companionship on their respective porches as the sun set. The 4th was Lena, Clara's wife. At 52, Lena was a symphony in contrast to Clara's grounded earthiness. A literary professor at the local college, she lived in a world of words and ideas. She was elegance personified, even in her worn-in jeans and cashmere sweaters. She moved with a dancer's grace, her dark eyes missing nothing, her mind constantly weaving narratives and parsing subtext. Her love for Clara was the great, anchoring truth of her life, a love that had weathered its own seasons. And there was the bed. Not just any bed. It was Eleanor's bed, a vast, oak-framed heirloom that had been in her family for generations. It was the heart of the house, a place of sleep, of conversation, of healing, and eventually, of love. This is their story. Part 1. The Fractures. 5 years ago, the house on Cypress Lane had been a place of profound loneliness for Eleanor. Her wife, Sarah, the love of her life, had passed after a long illness, leaving a silence so deep and vast that Eleanor felt she was drowning in it. The bed, once a warm tangle of limbs and whispered dreams, was a cold, empty continent. She would lie on her side, tracing the space where Sarah should be, the weight of her grief a physical presence on her chest. Next door, Clara and Lena were navigating a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of absence, but of distance. The passionate, all-consuming love of their early years had settled into a comfortable, yet sometimes lonely, routine. Their careers had pulled them in different directions. Their conversations had become about logistics, bills, groceries, whose turn it was to clean the gutters. The easy physicality had faded. They still shared a bed, but they often slept on their own sides, backs turned, a careful inch of space between them that felt like a canyon. Lena, feeling unseen, buried herself in her books. Clara, feeling unheard, poured all her affection into her garden. And Maya was across the country, living in a noisy loft in Brooklyn, trying to outrun the ghost of a toxic relationship with a woman who had systematically chipped away at her confidence. She felt unmoored, her art suffering, her spirit dimmed. The last, furious argument with Eleanor before she left, a clash of her youthful defiance and her mother's fearful concern, still echoed in her mind, a chasm of misunderstanding neither knew how to bridge. The change began, as great changes often do, with a small crack. It was a brutal winter night. A historic freeze had gripped the town, and a power line, heavy with ice, snapped and fell directly onto Clara and Lena's roof, sparking a small but destructive electrical fire in their attic. The damage to the upper floor was significant, and the water from the firefighters' hoses finished what the flames had started. Their home was uninhabitable. Standing on the sidewalk, wrapped in a blanket, watching smoke and steam curl into the frigid air, Clara and Lena held on to each other, shivering from more than just the cold. The scale of the loss was paralyzing. Eleanor, seeing the flashing lights from her window, didn't hesitate. She pulled on her boots and coat, marched across the lawn, and cut through the small gathering of neighbors. "You're not standing out here in this," she said, her voice brooking no argument. It was the tone she'd used when Maya was little and refused to wear her galoshes. "You have a room. You have rooms. The house is too big for me. You'll stay until you're back on your feet." Clara started to protest, tears welling in her eyes. "Eleanor, we couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," Eleanor said firmly, taking Clara's arm. "That's what neighbors are for. Come on. I've already put the kettle on." And so, the neighbors moved in. Eleanor gave them the large guest room down the hall from her own, but the first night, the shock of the event, the smell of smoke that clung to their few salvaged belongings, was too much. They found themselves sitting at Eleanor's large kitchen table, long after midnight, unable to sleep. Eleanor didn't offer platitudes. She simply listened. She poured 3 fingers of good whiskey into tumblers and let them talk, their words spilling out in a rush of fear and grief. Lena spoke of the manuscripts and first edition books she'd lost. Clara spoke of the garden she'd nurtured for a decade, now trampled by firefighters. Eleanor listened, her stormy eyes soft with empathy. Seeing their exhaustion, their hollowed-out expressions, she made a decision. "The guest bed is cold," she said. "And you both look like you need company." She led them to her own bedroom, to the great oak bed. "It's big enough for a small army. I'll not have you lying awake alone down the hall." It was an unorthodox offer, but in their state of shock, it felt like a lifeline. That first night, the 3 women slept in Eleanor's bed. Clara and Lena on one side, curled together for the first time in months, seeking comfort in the familiar shape of each other. Eleanor on the other, a steady, calming presence. It was not sexual. It was primal. It was about the fundamental human need for warmth, safety, and connection in the face of disaster. The bed, which had been a monument to Eleanor's loneliness, now held the gentle rhythm of 3 breathing bodies. The house sighed in contentment. Weeks turned into months. The insurance process was slow. A comfortable rhythm developed within the walls of the Victorian house. Clara took over the kitchen, her cooking a tangible expression of her gratitude. Lena filled the quiet rooms with music, often reading aloud in the evenings by the fire. Eleanor, who had grown used to the silence, found she loved the hum of life around her. And the bed remained their nightly meeting place. It became their confessional. In the dark, shielded from the daytime formalities, they began to talk. Really talk. They spoke of Sarah, Eleanor's voice thick with a love that had not dimmed with death. They spoke of Clara and Lena's early days, the dizzying, infatuated passion that had brought them together, reminding them of the foundation upon which their quieter love was built. One night, Lena, emboldened by the darkness, spoke of her fear that the best of them was behind them. Clara's hand found hers in the space between them. Maybe the best is just different, Clara whispered, her voice rough with emotion. Maybe it's deeper. Eleanor listened, her heart aching for them. She saw in them a reflection of what she had lost, but also a mirror of what could be saved. She began, gently, to play the role of catalyst. She would leave a book of love poems on Lena's desk. She would ask Clara to teach her about the flowers Sarah had loved, knowing it would reconnect Clara to her own passion. The space between Clara and Lena in the bed began to shrink. A hand would be held. A head would rest on a shoulder. The careful inch of space vanished. One evening, about 3 months after the fire, Eleanor came down with a terrible flu. It settled in her chest, and her coughing echoed through the house. Clara, the nurturer, insisted on staying with her, propping her up with pillows, bringing her tea and honey. Lena, worried, fluttered around them both. That night, Clara didn't even ask. She simply helped Eleanor into bed and climbed in beside her, on what had been Sarah's side, to be closer to care for her. Lena climbed in on the other side. They were a triptych of care, Eleanor in the middle, held and tended to by her friends. As Eleanor's fever broke in the middle of the night, she woke to a profound sensation. Clara was pressed against her back, one arm thrown over her waist in sleep, her breathing deep and even. Lena was facing her, their foreheads almost touching, her hand resting on Eleanor's arm. She was surrounded, protected, loved. A tear slipped down her temple and into her hair. The deep freeze around her own heart, the one that had persisted since Sarah's death, began, for the first time, to truly thaw. She felt a shift. The gentle, platonic care was still there, but it was now tinged with something else, a profound intimacy, a current of unspoken attraction that hummed in the warm space between their bodies. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, things were different. A new awareness hummed in the air between them. A lingering touch as Clara handed Eleanor a cup of tea. A held gaze between Lena and Eleanor that lasted a second too long. The domesticity of their life together had taken on a new, charged potential. It was Clara who was brave enough to give it a name. She found Eleanor in the garden, repotting a seedling. The spring air was warm and sweet. "Eleanor," Clara said, her voice steady but her hands shoved deep in her pockets. "These feelings, what's happening between us, between the three of us? I need to know if I'm imagining it." Eleanor looked up, her stormy eyes clear. She wiped her hands on her apron. "You're not imagining it, Clara." "And Lena?" "I feel it too," Lena's voice came from the porch. She was standing there, having heard everything, her arms crossed over her chest, not in defense, but as if holding herself together. It's immense. And complicated." "It is complicated," Eleanor agreed, walking toward the porch. "But my life has already been built on a love that was called complicated. I'm not afraid of complicated. I'm only afraid of not being true to what my heart is telling me." "And what is it telling you?" Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor reached the steps and looked up at Lena, then at Clara who had come to stand beside her. "It's telling me that love isn't a finite resource. That my love for Sarah isn't diminished by this. It's telling me that my heart has somehow grown large enough to hold you both. It's telling me that this," she gestured between the three of them, "feels like a second chance I never dared to hope for." Clara let out a shaky breath, a tear tracing a path through the faint freckles on her cheek. Lena descended the steps and took Eleanor's hand, then reached for Clara's. That night, they didn't just sleep in the bed. They came together in it with a new, trembling intention. It was not a frantic coupling of youth, but a slow, worshipful exploration. It was Clara's earth-stained hands learning the map of Eleanor's silver streaked skin. It was Lena's eloquent mouth finding new poetry on Clara's body, a language she thought she'd forgotten. It was Eleanor, rediscovering her own capacity for pleasure, guiding their hands and mouths, showing them what she liked, learning what made them sigh and tremble. It was a revelation. A homecoming. Part 2, The Daughter's Return. This was the world that Maya stepped back into. Broke, heartbroken, and humbled, she had finally left her toxic girlfriend and, with nowhere else to go, had swallowed her pride and called her mother. Eleanor's voice on the phone had been warm, devoid of any "I told you so." "Come home, darling," she'd said, and the word home had shattered the last of Maya's defenses. When Maya's beat-up car pulled into the driveway, she was prepared for the quiet, slightly sad house of her memory. She was not prepared for the scene that greeted her. The garden, which had always been nice but tidy, was now a breathtaking explosion of color and life. Lush and wild, it looked like something from a fairy tale. As she got out of the car, she heard laughter from the back. She walked around the side of the house, her suitcase in hand, and stopped dead. There was her mother, sitting at a rustic table under a wisteria-covered arbor. And she was not alone. Clara from next door was leaning over her, one hand on Eleanor's shoulder, the other pointing to something in a book. And Lena was next to Clara, her head thrown back in laughter at something Eleanor had said. The scene was one of such easy, intimate familiarity that it took Maya's breath away. It looked like a painting of a happy family. A family her mother was at the center of. "Maya." Eleanor's face lit up when she saw her. She rose, her movement graceful, and opened her arms. Maya walked into her embrace, the familiar scent of her mother's lavender and vanilla soap filling her senses. But there was something else there too, a new vitality, a lightness in her mother's touch she hadn't felt in years. "Mom," Maya mumbled into her shoulder. "Your garden." "That's all Clara's doing," Eleanor said, releasing her but keeping an arm around her waist. "She's been working miracles." Clara smiled, a genuine, warm smile. It was good soil. It just needed a little encouragement. "It's good to see you, Maya." Lena stood and gave Maya a brief, graceful hug. "Welcome home. You're just in time for dinner." Home. There was that word again. The evening was a whirlwind of delicious food, cooked by Clara, fascinating conversation, led by Lena, and quiet, observant love, radiating from her mother. Maya learned about the fire next door and that Clara and Lena were staying here temporarily. But the word temporary felt false. The way they moved around the kitchen together, the way Lena knew exactly where Eleanor kept the peppercorn grinder, the way Clara automatically poured Eleanor a glass of wine without asking, it spoke of a deep, settled domesticity. And then there was the sleeping arrangement. Maya was given the guest room, the one Clara and Lena were supposedly using. But that first night, as she lay awake, she heard the soft pad of footsteps past her door and the quiet click of her mother's bedroom door closing. A few minutes later, she heard it again. She got up to get a glass of water and saw, unmistakably, 3 pairs of shoes outside her mother's door, Eleanor's sensible slippers, Clara's worn gardening clogs, and Lena's neat leather flats. Her mind reeled. It was one thing to take in your neighbors. It was another to, what exactly were they all? The thought was so enormous, so unconventional, that she didn't know how to process it. A strange brew of confusion, jealousy, and curiosity stirred within her. The next few days were a masterclass in subtle observation. She saw the way Lena would sometimes brush a stray strand of hair from Eleanor's face with a tenderness that was far beyond friendship. She saw the way Clara's hand would rest on the small of Eleanor's back when they passed each other in a hallway, a touch that was possessive and reverent all at once. She saw the way her mother's eyes followed them both, lit with a soft, inner light Maya hadn't seen since before her other mother, Sarah, had gotten sick. Maya felt like an outsider in her own home. These 3 women had built a world together, a perfect, intimate circle, and she was on the periphery, looking in. Her own heart was raw from her failed relationship, and seeing this abundance of love, however unorthodox, was both beautiful and salt in her wounds. The tension came to a head one afternoon. Maya was in her makeshift studio in the sunroom, angrily hacking at a block of clay that refused to cooperate. Her frustration was about more than the art. Clara found her there. "Rough day?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Maya didn't look up. "It's fine." Clara walked in and looked at the tortured piece of clay. "It doesn't look fine. It looks like you're fighting with it. What do you know about it?" Maya snapped, the words coming out harsher than she intended. Clara didn't flinch. She just looked at Maya with those calm, knowing eyes. "I know a little about shaping stubborn things. You can't force it. You have to work with it. Understand its nature." Maya threw her tools down. "What is going on here, Clara? Really? Clara was silent for a moment. What do you think is going on? I think you and your wife are sleeping with my mother, Maya said, the words hanging in the air, blunt and shocking. Clara didn't deny it. She simply nodded, her expression open. We love her. And she loves us. How? Why? It's weird. Is it? Clara asked gently. Is love ever really weird? Or is it just love? It happened slowly. It happened because we were all lonely and we found comfort in each other. And then we found more than comfort. We found joy. But she's my mom, Maya said, her voice cracking. And you're both women. And neighbors. It's a lot. It is a lot, Clara agreed. It's the most wonderful, surprising thing that has ever happened to me, besides falling in love with Lena. Your mother is extraordinary. She's brave and kind and she has so much love left to give. We're not trying to replace anyone, Maya. Not Sarah. And certainly not you. The fight went out of Maya. The confusion and jealousy were still there, but under them, she heard the simple, undeniable truth in Clara's words. This wasn't some sordid affair. This was love. A strange, beautiful, messy, lesbian love story happening right in front of her. It was Eleanor who provided the final key to understanding. She found Maya later that evening, sitting on the back porch steps, watching the fireflies blink over Clara's magnificent garden. She sat down beside her, not speaking for a long time. Finally, she said, when Sarah died, a part of me went with her. I thought that was it for me. That my life of love was over. I was prepared to live in the quiet, to just be your mother from a distance, to tend to Sarah's memory. I was content with that. She picked up a fallen magnolia leaf, tracing its veins. But the heart is a stubborn, miraculous thing. It doesn't want to be content. It wants to be alive. Clara and Lena, they didn't wake me up. They found me already awake, but standing very still in a dark room. They took my hand and they led me outside into the sunlight. They made me remember what it feels like to be desired, to be cherished, to laugh until my sides hurt. Maya looked at her mother's profile, soft in the twilight. She saw not a mom, but a woman. A beautiful, vibrant, sexual woman who had endured great loss and found a second chance at happiness in the most unexpected of places. I love them, Maya, Eleanor said, turning to face her daughter, her stormy eyes earnest. And it doesn't diminish my love for Sarah. Or for you. Love isn't a pie. Giving them a slice doesn't mean there's less for anyone else. It means the pie just gets bigger. Maya leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, just as she had as a child. I don't want to be on the outside, she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. Eleanor wrapped an arm around her. Oh, my darling girl. You could never be on the outside. You are my daughter. You are part of my heart. This, she gestured to the house, to the garden, to the women inside. This is just our family. It's a little bigger. A little more complicated. And a lot more wonderful. There's always a place for you inside the circle. The simple acceptance in her mother's words finally dissolved the last of Maya's resistance. She was home. And home was not a static thing. It was a living, growing, evolving entity, just like the garden, just like love itself. Part 3. The whole garden. With the walls of misunderstanding gone, Maya began to truly see the beauty of the world her mother had built. She saw the delicate balance of it, how Clara's grounded nature provided stability for Lena's intellectual flights of fancy and Eleanor's gentle wisdom. She saw how Lena's passion for language and story brought a new dimension of romance to Clara's life and rekindled a playful side in Eleanor. She saw how her mother's deep, calm love gave both Clara and Lena a safe harbor they hadn't even known they were missing. She became their witness. Their chronicler. She started sculpting again, her block of clay finally yielding, taking the form of 3 intertwined figures, not separate, but flowing into one another, supported by a strong, central core. She called it the Trinity. Life settled into a new, richer rhythm. Maya found a job at a local art gallery and a small studio space downtown, but her heart was always drawn back to the house on Cypress Lane. She also began to notice something else. A specific energy that flowed between her and Lena. It was different from the almost maternal affection she felt from Clara or the deep, foundational bond with her mother. With Lena, it was a meeting of minds, a spark of artistic and intellectual recognition. Lena was the one who would spend hours with her in the sunroom, talking about art theory and the symbolism in Maya's work. Lena's eyes would light up when she talked about a novel she was teaching, and Maya would hang on every word, captivated by the way she wove narratives. They were kindred spirits, both creators, both feelers. Maya found herself seeking out Lena's company, her heart beating a little faster when Lena praised her work. She admired the elegant curve of Lena's neck as she read, the way she bit her lip in concentration. It was a crush, she told herself. A silly, harmless infatuation with her mother's partner, a partner her mother shared. She tried to ignore it, to bury it deep. But Lena, ever the perceptive one, noticed the shift. One afternoon, they were alone in the garden. Clara was at a supplier, and Eleanor was at a doctor's appointment. Maya was sketching while Lena read aloud from a book of Mary Oliver poems. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees. For 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Lena's voice was like dark honey, and the words washed over Maya, resonating deep in her soul. She looked up from her sketchpad, her eyes meeting Lena's. The air between them grew thick and charged. That's it, isn't it? Maya whispered. That's what you all did. You just let your soft animals love what they love. Lena closed the book slowly, her gaze never leaving Maya's. It's the bravest thing a person can do. They looked at each other for a long, breathless moment. The unspoken attraction was a live wire between them. Maya, Lena said, her voice soft but serious. I feel something when I'm with you. And I think you feel it too. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She nodded, unable to speak. This is complex, Lena said, a faint smile touching her lips. But this household seems to specialize in complex love. We cannot act on this. Not without speaking to Clara and Eleanor. What we have, the three of us, it's sacred. It's the foundation of everything. I will not jeopardize it for anything, not even for this beautiful, tempting feeling. Her honesty was both devastating and affirming. Maya nodded again, her throat tight. I know. I would never want to hurt any of you. Or break what you have. What we have, Lena corrected gently. You are part of this now, Maya. You are part of our family. And families communicate. That night, after dinner, Lena did something breathtakingly brave. In the soft light of the living room, with all four of them together, she broached the subject. We need to talk, she said, her voice calm but her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Clara, then at Eleanor, and finally at Maya. Something has come up. My feelings, they have expanded. Clara's brow furrowed in concern. Eleanor reached for her hand, her expression one of calm support. I have developed a powerful attraction to Maya, Lena said, the words clear and direct. It is intellectual, artistic, and increasingly physical. I have not acted on it. I would not. But I cannot hide it. Not from you. Not in this house, which is built on truth. A stunned silence filled the room. Maya held her breath, waiting for the explosion. Clara looked from Lena to Maya, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Eleanor. Eleanor, surprisingly, was smiling a small, knowing smile. I wondered when that would happen, Eleanor said softly. Clara let out a long, slow breath. I'm not blind, she said, her voice low. I've seen the way you look at each other. She turned to Maya. And you? How do you feel? Maya found her voice. I have feelings for Lena too. But I love you both. I love my mom. I would never do anything to ruin this. I'm so sorry if this. Stop, Clara said, holding up a hand. She wasn't angry. She was thoughtful. We don't do shame here. And we don't do apologies for feelings. She looked at Lena, her eyes full of a deep, abiding love. You are my wife. My heart. And my heart is capable of understanding this. She then looked at Eleanor. Ellie. Eleanor squeezed Clara's hand. Love isn't a pie, remember, she said, echoing her own words to Maya. My love for you, Clara, is its own complete, wonderful thing. My love for Lena is its own unique song. Who am I to say that Lena's heart cannot have room for Maya as well? That Maya's heart cannot have room for her? It was a radical, breathtaking concept. Not a betrayal, but an expansion. The question is, Eleanor continued, what do we all want? And what are the boundaries? This is new territory, even for us. What followed was the most honest, vulnerable, and strange conversation of Maya's life. They talked for hours. They established boundaries. They voiced fears. They affirmed their love for each other, in all its different forms. Clara confessed that seeing Lena's passion ignited by Maya's youthful energy made her feel a renewed attraction to her wife. Eleanor expressed that her primary role was as Maya's mother, and that would always be protected and sacred, but that she also saw Maya as a remarkable woman she was proud to know. It was decided, tentatively, and with great care, to allow the connection between Lena and Maya to unfold naturally, with complete transparency. There would be no secrets. Everything would be out in the open. The first time Lena kissed Maya, it was in the garden, under the stars. Clara and Eleanor were watching from the porch, their hands intertwined. It was not a moment of exclusion, but of inclusion. A new vine was being added to their beautiful, tangled garden. Maya's relationship with Lena was different from anything she'd ever known. It was a meeting of equals, passionate and intellectually stimulating. And it existed within the safe, loving container of her relationship with her mother and with Clara. She didn't have to choose. Her world got bigger. And then, slowly, another shift occurred. A natural, organic extension of the love that already flowed so freely between them all. It started with casual touches that lingered. A hug with Clara that felt less like a motherly embrace and more like the hold of a lover. A shared look across the dinner table that held a new heat. Maya had always found Clara attractive, her strength, her quiet competence, her earthy beauty, but she had never dared to entertain the thought. One evening, they were working together in the garden, repotting seedlings. Their hands brushed in the rich soil, and instead of pulling away, they lingered. Clara looked up, her gaze intense. This family of ours, Clara said, her voice low. It doesn't follow any rules, does it? Maya shook her head, her heart in her throat. No, it doesn't. I love you, Maya, Clara said. It was a statement of fact, simple and profound. Not in the same way I love Lena, or Eleanor. And not just as my lover's daughter. I love you. The artist you are. The woman you've become. Tears filled Maya's eyes. I love you too, Clara. And just like that, another chamber of her heart opened up. When Maya finally joined the three of them in the great oak bed, it was the most natural thing in the world. It was not an orgy of passion, but a sacred communion. A culmination. They made love slowly, tenderly, each pair and permutation explored and cherished within the safety of the whole. It was Maya learning the familiar landscape of her mother's body from a new, awe-inspiring perspective. Not as a child, but as a lover, with a reverence that brought tears to both their eyes. It was Clara worshipping Maya's youthful, vibrant form with a tenderness that spoke of deep affection. It was Lena, the connector, the weaver of stories, moving between them all, her love the thread that bound them together. They were 4 women, 1 mother, 1 daughter, 2 neighbors, 1 bed. They were a family. They were a love story. The great oak bed, witness to so much life, held them all, a tangled, happy, sighing heap of limbs and love. It was the heart of the house, and now it was full. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Eleanor was the first to wake. She looked at the 3 sleeping women she loved, her daughter, her head on Clara's shoulder, her lover, Clara's arm thrown protectively over Maya, her wife, Lena's back pressed against Clara's, her hand resting on Eleanor's hip. A profound peace settled over her. This was her life. This was her second chance. It was messy, it was complicated, it was unconventional. It was more than she had ever dared to dream of. She leaned over and pressed a soft kiss to Lena's forehead, then to Clara's shoulder, and finally to her daughter's hair. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around at the three incredible women in the bed with her, and a smile of pure, unadulterated joy spread across her face. She was home. She was loved. She was part of something magnificent. Outside, the garden, lush and wild and beautiful, bloomed in the morning sun, a perfect reflection of the love that grew, untamed and glorious, within the walls of the old Victorian house. It was a garden of second chances, and every day, it grew new flowers.